Sportageous. Sport gets smarter.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Sportageous Cast. Be sure to like, subscribe, and follow wherever you're tuning in from. Our guest today, is a former professional squash player from the UK. She reached a career high ranking of world number 1 and retired in May 2019 with 23 PSA titles, including a World Championships title, 2 British Opens. She even represented England 103 times and has recently released her book, All In, Becoming World Champion. Laura Massaro, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for the nice intro.
Yeah, look, Laura, I mean, being very honest, you've done it all. Medals at the Commonwealth Games, like I just mentioned, World Championship title, British Open titles. What has retirement been like for you?
For about 6 months, it was really good. Was able to enjoy life, and then lockdown hit, like everybody in the world. But I guess personally, it hasn't been the worst thing in the world. I mean, obviously, I wouldn't have chosen it, but now I can look back and think, about the lockdown. It's probably been quite nice for me to be able to fully retire, and it's made me retire and not just kind of finish playing on the PSA tour and then go out and do 100 different things, probably none of them that well. So it's made me retire and kind of decide a little bit more clearly what I want to do going forward.
Yeah, sure. That's really interesting because, one of the things when it comes to athletes sort of, figuring out their post-career life, there's, on the one hand, a lot of regret, or at times they don't have regret. At times they're very well sort of, they understand really well what they want to do, whereas others don't really know. What are some of the lessons that you've learned, with retirement? Was there something that you had in mind prior to retiring as to what you were going to do in the future? And what's something that you can sort of tell, or any advice that you could give to athletes who are sort of nearing that end of their athletic career, but now want to move in to doing something around the sport, or perhaps, writing a book, whatever it might be? What are your thoughts on that? And what is some advice that you could potentially give?
Well, I think most athletes will probably have an idea before they retire whether or not wanting to stay within their sport is something that they want to do post-career. I wasn't always 100% sure that was what I wanted to do. But as I got a little bit older and I got involved a little bit more towards the end of my career with kind of like mentoring and joining in on some of the England junior squads, I started to really realize how much knowledge I had and how much I could pass on and how much I could really help, which also links into why I wanted to write the book as well, because there's also, I just felt like there was a lot that I could give back to the sport. That's not for everybody. Some people have given it their all on a professional career and want to step away from the sport or don't see coaching for them, and they'll probably know that. So I think, like I said before, the COVID definitely being in lockdown has made it a little bit clearer and a little bit more simple. Haven't been able to leave the country. So any sort of camps, exhibition type things has sort of gone out the window. But other opportunities have popped up in terms of trying to develop a style of coaching over Zoom and kind of getting back on doing squads once the courts reopened, socially distanced and stuff like that. So I'm really keen to try and give back. And I guess if you're someone who doesn't want to get involved in a sport post-career, then you're going to look into kind of getting a qualification before that time comes.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, with COVID around and you being locked up, was the book always on the cards, or was it a manifestation of being stuck at home, essentially?
No, it's always been on the cards. And Danny, my husband, and I obviously traveled a lot with me while I played. And we always used to say kind of when something bad happened more than when something good happened, oh, that'll make it if I ever write a book, or that'll be its own chapter if I ever write a book. it probably hasn't turned out quite that way in terms of what's included in the book, as it never does. But there was always a thought in the back of my mind that no female squash player had written a book. I wanted to do that as soon as I retired as I could, while my name was still sort of known a little bit better in the squash world. I would have probably liked to have done it while I was playing, but the book is quite honest, and it gives away a lot of my own vulnerabilities and my own insecurities more than anything. And that's definitely not something that I would have wanted people knowing while I was still playing. So it was a good time to kind of get it done after. And then it's actually been ready probably a lot longer than to be released just now, but we didn't know how well I could promote it, how well it would be received in sort of a lockdown period. And then with it just going on and on and on, we just decided to bite the bullet and go for like 1st of June. And timing's not ideal still because of not being able to do exhibitions and get in front of big crowds, but it's and no crowds at events and stuff stops me traveling to events. But overall, I feel like it's been a pretty good timing considering the last couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely. I think things are a lot better off now than they were same time last year. But Laura, I do want to get into the book, of course. And for everyone watching or listening, be sure to head to the description or the caption wherever you are watching or listening and get your hands on the book, which we will be talking about now. Also follow Laura on social media, wherever you do go on social media, so that you can stay in tune with what she's up to. Laura, you talked about a very interesting thing there, which I wanted to raise. The first female squash athlete to write a book. This isn't the first of firsts when it comes to you, obviously. Another very important topic, and something that squash has been very proud to, as an entity, promote as of late, has been equal pay at tournaments and across the squash circuit. You were obviously at the forefront of this. What were the sort of challenges that you came across in making this happen? And can you run us, I know you talk about this in the book a little bit, but maybe keeping it a bit more sort of high level, just to share what the whole process was like and what the difficulties were like. Because obviously, there is this perception that was more prominent 10 or 15 years ago, but is still prominent in a lot of places around squash being the boys' club. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on, what that experience was like, what the challenges were like, and how did you sort of overcome them?
Yeah, so to kind of cut probably a really long story short, it was, now looking back with the women and the men together at PSA, it just seems like it was always that way, and it was a perfect fit and, a no-brainer to a lot of extent. But when the women were part of the WSA and the men were PSA, there was a lot of resistance on both sides, understandably. The women were worried that if we joined with the men, that we would just be sort of used as like this kind of tagline of, oh yeah, squash are really all about equality. And, kind of the women would get swallowed up and the men would take over and we would just kind of pale away. Then there was also resistance on the men's side that said, well, why do we want the women on board when our tour's doing great? Like, there's only one thing going to happen, and it's going to dilute the men's tour and take tournaments away from them and take, resources away from their tour. I think the overall vibe was that there was also a lot of women who could see how well the men were doing. So although there was resistance from certain players on the women's tour, there was also a lot of kind of, there's a lot of women who could see the vision of how well the men were doing and how together maybe we could be stronger, rather than splitting the viewership, the sponsorship, the tournaments necessarily. We could join together and have one platform, like obviously it's now become one website, one squash TV, one kind of refereeing directive, everything has kind of just become one. So the goal kind of coming on as a player who had been approached to try and kind of make this happen was really just to try and encourage the girls to have faith. And the PSA, what was the men's side at the time, basically were saying that, to the men and to the women that the women would be included as equals, because the men's tour was growing so fast, the women's tour was getting left behind. And as a sport, that actually wasn't a great thing. There was always going to be a cap and a level on what the men could achieve, while the women were kind of dragging behind a little bit. It's not a great look for the sport. And so together we could be stronger and go through that. So it was a case of just kind of, you know, doing everything correctly and doing it the right way and trying to convince a lot of players. And, you know, it's easy now to look back and go, oh yeah, well, it was obviously the right thing to do. But at the time it was very stressful and very worrying. And we didn't know if we were doing the right thing or not, as you never do when you're kind of trying to do something a bit different. So yeah, I'm really glad it turned out to be for the best.
Oh, absolutely. I think that, you know, people tune into both sides of the sport now just as much as they would have then to the men's game. So it's been fantastic to see. I surely tune in to see both, you know, what's happening in both worlds, which is absolutely incredible. And the fact that both of those worlds are now one united aspect of it is fantastic. But Laura, coming back to the book, you know, having done not only having, you know, been world number one, but also having achieved all these things within the sport on a broader scale, you talk a lot about in the book, you talk a lot about, you know, things like self-doubt, nerves, the mental side of things. What can you expand on that a little bit and sort of, you know, how did you overcome that? Because I always find it really, really interesting, the sort of pressure that professional athletes often have of performing, being productive, staying at the optimal level and, you know, doing their best. There's so many pressures and expectations. How do you sort of overcome that, and how do you manage it, more importantly, you know, internally, but also with the support of your peers and people on your team and so on?
Yeah, I mean, like I said before, the book and how I go into detail is like I'm hoping that talking about a lot of this stuff will really help a lot of players and sports people in general. Because I wanted to write the book because I've read so many books over the course of my career that have helped me with my squash. And there's actually a list at the back of the book of over 100 books that are just sport related books that have helped me. And some of those books have helped me win matches, win tournaments, just by remembering a story while I was playing. And like I said, I wouldn't have wanted to write it while I was playing just because of the like how vulnerable perhaps people would have seen me. And, you know, with this persona of being mentally strong and having the Ice Queen nickname, you want to play on that, and you want to make sure that people think that you are really mentally strong and have it all together. But I think the reason I wanted to write the book also was because I wanted people to know that I had that persona and I had that kind of reputation of being really mentally strong, and it wasn't always the case. And so there's a way that, you know, you can work through that and still reach your goals. So I just probably talk a lot about how I got to that place. And I think you read throughout the book, like actually at the start of my career, like my junior and early senior career, there was a lot of fear of failure. So I would compete and be determined and really hard, but there was also a real lot of nerves and worry about losing. And it was always about fear of failure rather than kind of wanting to go and win matches. And that was really hard going. And I think the way I maybe got over that over the years was just purely self-development. It was a complete honesty within myself and with the people around me about how I was playing, what could be improved, what could be done better. There was never any sort of like brushing things under the carpet and making sure that, you know, oh, that'll be better just in time. It's like, no, it needs addressing, and it needs addressing now. So over the course of the years, reading all of these books, doing self-development, doing neuro-linguistic programming courses, working on myself mentally, seeing the brain as a muscle that I can develop as much as I can develop my quads or my lungs. Over the course of the year, I feel like I took a lot of that kind of determination and like fear of failure, you know, that absolute desire to not lose, sort of balance it out with like, how can I perform at my best? How can I get these nerves less? And I took all of that fear of failure, desire not to lose, forward into performance and getting the best out of myself. And then when the two sort of came together in my late 20s, I had a relaxation and a performance focus and a real good like mental strength that came from my younger days. And then I had actually the game and the technique and the tactical ability to put it together in big events. And that's when things started to click for me, I think, late 20s.
Yeah, wow. Look, that's absolutely amazing. And to be able to sort of, work through that and also maintain the sort of performance that you did throughout, but then also to be able to sort of share it and open up about it is absolutely fantastic. Another aspect, I think, of your book is where, your personal and professional life intertwine. And obviously your husband's also been your coach, and with a sport that, everyone knows that squash is so grueling, super competitive. Even if you play at an amateur level, such as myself, you know how intense it is. Work on the one hand, obviously you've got your personal life, but then you're also working with your husband on the professional side of things. What sort of, I guess, challenges, but also what sort of benefits has that had? And I know that you talk about it in your book, but just to give a bit of an idea to everyone watching or listening, how does that dynamic work? I'd love to sort of hear about that.
Well, I think that Danny and I are like hugely passionate on what we do and what we set out to do, and I was lucky enough that he got on board with my goals of wanting to be the best in the world, and he helped me in every way to kind of achieve that. And there is still period, not now, but there was always periods throughout my career where it was heavy and it was detailed, and the squash seemingly never ended. And that's probably, it's not a negative, but it's probably not a positive either, that a lot of relationships probably couldn't handle that. And there was times where I would say to him, like, we're just talking about squash all the time. And he's like, yeah. And then when the squash is finished, we'll talk about something else, and and we were on this mission. And I guess the downside kind of for me was that it was hard to ever step away from it, because it was always like I'd go to training, I'd come home and we would talk about it and But I do think that was a really big thing for me making it to where I did with the titles that I did. It was like when athletes say to make it to the top, it's a 24-hour job. And it was like, even your rest day is like, I'm resting, and I'm resting well so that I can train well again on Monday. And it's not for everybody, and it's really difficult, kind of, it's very intense. And that was how I wanted to live my squash life, and Danny was totally on board with that. And now into retirement, that sort of, obviously it's changed. The squash isn't there, and we're not on that mission to be the best in the world. So I feel lucky and privileged that both of us were able to put so much time, dedication and mental energy into kind of what was making me the best squash player that I could be. And I'm really grateful for that.
Definitely. And with the book, Laura, I believe you've got an audio version of it coming out as well, if I'm not mistaken. So what's going on over there?
Yeah, so the book's available in hardback and paperback. The paperback's available globally on Amazon. The hardback and the paperback are both available on my website, and the hardback is a signed edition, and it's really special. It's color and everything like that. It's also available on ebook, Kindle, and Google, I think it is. And then in hopefully early July, we've got an audio book version coming out. So I know there's a few people waiting to get their hands on that. And the book is read by me during the audiobook. So if you like the way I talk, it's for you. If you don't, then it's not for you. And throughout the book, we thought it was a really cool idea to put guest chapters in. So there's like kind of a chapter from my coach, DP, Danny, who was obviously my coach, my husband, my psychologist, my physio, my manager, my physical trainer. So they all have chapters, and the majority of them came into the studio and recorded their own chapter if COVID allowed. There's a couple we couldn't actually get done, but it breaks up my northern accent, and it helps you put a bit of a voice to someone's name, and kind of a really nice feature on the audiobook. So I'm hoping that comes across really well.
Absolutely. Really eager to check it out. For once again, everyone watching or listening, be sure to check out the links in the description caption below. Go buy the book. If you're waiting for the audiobook, be sure to follow Laura on social media. Those links will be down below as well. Laura, just before we conclude, now with the book available globally, obviously the audiobook's still in the process of being launched, but what's the next step? What have you got coming up in, your post-career journey?
Yeah, so I guess kind of that time that allowed me to sort of get myself straight. I was set up, kind of a bit at my local club. So getting on doing some coaching. I've also got involved with the county setup, which I'm really passionate about. I loved playing for the county when I was junior. So Lancashire, I'm the Lancashire junior head coach. And then I'm also involved with England squash as well. And again, I think I can really help kind of juniors and maybe transitioning pros really well. That's probably where my skill set is going to best lie at the moment for these few years where I get into things. I also work as the professional player consultant for Head, who sponsored me for 8 years. So I'm the one linking in with the players, and hopefully when COVID allows, traveling to a few events, and actually pregnant as well. So I don't know how that's obviously going to affect things.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm actually due in October, so I'm still able to kind of get on court for the time being, although there's a rapidly growing bump at the front of my belly that I'm not used to. So we'll see how long that goes on for. But I'm hoping to, obviously just make the most of the next year or so, and then kind of build back into normal life from there, hopefully.
Wow. So even though the professional career has ended, there's still so much going on, which is fantastic to see, Laura. Look, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show, and looking forward to further success on the book front, and also with the rest of your career and life ahead, with the baby as well. Wish you all the best, and, we'll definitely be in touch.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. I hope everyone enjoys the book.